She is not in that water. I can tell you that much. She is not. She was never put there.
And I am not accusing him of doing anything at this moment.
I simply don't believe she is in the water.
The night Lynette Hooker went missing, and the closest beach on Elbow Cay,
and had spent weeks living out on the open ocean and dry land.
The heavy wind separated us so quickly that
I think she tried to swim back to our sailboat. The Sea of Abaco has been searched by dive teams, the Coast Guard, from the air and on foot.
the Soulmate is now docked at Fort Pierce, Florida,
wrapped in yellow crime scene tape, and the one number that changes everything.
the figure that rewrites every single question. Before we go further, Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime as of today. Official court records and independent published analyses. If you have tracked this mystery, you know Lynette Hooker through the life she shared online. She and her husband built a quiet retirement life out on the water, leaving Michigan behind. Lynette was 55 years old when she vanished. Brian was 58. Clip after clip showed her in motion, the wind in her hair, sunlight catching the water. She sailed through the Bahamas like someone who had found her true home. A couple crafting a new chapter together once their working years were behind them. Lynette and Brian sailing through tight channels between the cays, filling scuba tanks, often without life jackets, showing how safe and routine they felt these quick trips were. These were two people who truly felt at home on the ocean. Her post caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, later spoke with ABC News following the disappearance. Hamlet told ABC News that Lynette grew up on a lake, could swim, scuba dive, handle boats, and used to run marathons and practice yoga. She called her daughter a lovely lady and described a strong, fit woman. Lynette's daughter, Carly Aylesworth, described her mother as highly active, saying, "My mom is very strong and a great swimmer." The whole story simply does not make sense to me. The official public details that make that 600-foot distance so incredibly important. She never made it to that shore. A text message sent by Lynette before her Bahamas trip to someone whose identity remains a secret. That text message has never been explained, and Brian Hooker's lawyers have not addressed it. Sits completely unresolved, waiting for the official investigation to finally catch up. Happy place, raising a haunting question that nobody following this mystery can seem to answer. Let us examine Brian Hooker's timeline exactly as he laid it out. On the evening of April 4th, 2026, Brian and Lynette Hooker left the Abaco Inn in Hopetown on Elbow Cay. They departed at roughly 7:30 p.m. The water ahead of them was pitch black. They were making for the Soulmate. Cruising along the western coast of Elbow Cay, under calm skies, with a quiet electric outboard motor. According to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, she was wearing the safety lanyard. When Lynette fell overboard, that lanyard went with her. The motor died instantly, which the Stevensons later posted publicly on their YouTube channel. He claimed Lynette had basically just tumbled off the dinghy. He claimed the wind was around 20 miles per hour and that he tossed a flotation cushion to her. But I could not tell if she managed to grab it. He claimed the heavy currents swept her away and he quickly lost sight of her. Richard Cook shared a key detail with CNN that Brian never mentioned publicly. Directly toward the shoreline, just 600 feet from where the Soulmate was anchored. But that is not the only version Brian offered regarding the direction Lynette was swimming. He wrote, "Two stories, two different directions." She was actually swimming toward the Soulmate, and both of these accounts came directly from Brian Hooker. Now for the timeline, because the hours matter immensely. Brian and Lynette left Hopetown at 7:30 p.m. on April 4th. Roughly 4.5 nautical miles west of where the Soulmate lay anchored. He pushed through the thick brush to reach the boatyard. Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue was notified at 5:12 a.m. During those 9.5 hours, there was no VHF radio call. Let that sink in, because the maritime community has strict protocols for this exact scenario. The immediate, trained reaction. The instinctive broadcast on the international distress frequency, monitored constantly by the Coast Guard and every nearby boat. You call for help, but Brian Hooker claimed he lost engine power right when Lynette went overboard. But those run on batteries. Whether the Soulmate carried a handheld VHF radio, as almost every cruising sailboat does, or stowed one on the dinghy, is a detail investigators can pull from the boat's inventory.
The Soulmate was also equipped with Starlink satellite internet, a feature widely documented on their social media.
The question is, what calls were made and not made during those critical hours? 9.5 hours.
With absolutely no attempt to contact any other vessel, even though at least one boat was moored close by.
Search and rescue personnel later escorted Brian back on board the Soulmate.
He spent 24 hours on the boat after searching for only 3 to 4 hours initially.
Instead of searching the coast of Elbow Cay,
He and his wife Marn had originally met the Hookers through the tight-knit sailing community. He eventually released that recorded phone call to the public. He told Fox News Digital that Brian never truly confronted the crisis, and later told NewsNation that Brian seriously needed to step up,
emphasizing that Brian was a former Marine and the man he knew should have been out there doing everything possible. Then he asked a chillingly direct question: does he not want redemption?
That question remains unanswered to this day.
On April 8th, Bahamian police detained him under what a Royal Bahamas police force official described to Reuters as probable cause. By April 13th, 9 days after Lynette vanished, he was released without any charges. He publicly insisted he would never stop searching for Lynette.
I am going to need someone with more authority to tell me to stop. Yet hours later, he boarded a commercial flight and left.
On his public Facebook page, Brian shared a formal statement after her disappearance, blaming rough seas and strong winds for causing his beloved Lynette to fall from their small dinghy near Elbow Cay in the Bahamas.
We are still actively searching for her, and that remains my only focus. Now we must map those claims against the actual geography. On April 18, 2026, 14 days after Lynette vanished, Lyles penned his very first notes on the case from Nassau. As a fellow sailor cruising the same island chain, he watched the mystery unfold directly from the water. His analysis carries the weight of someone who truly knows these waters, not from a distant newsroom, but from years of sailing them. Backed by documented, measurable, and chart-verified geography. Just north of Tahiti Beach is where the Sea of Abaco narrows. Investigators then measured the distance from that anchorage to the closest beach on Elbow Cay. In certain spots, the distance from that anchorage to the Elbow Cay shoreline drops to barely 300 feet, roughly the length of a football field, or the width of a single city block. Lyles wrote that if she went into the water near Soulmate, she was actually close enough to walk out of it in less time than it takes to read this paragraph. During those weeks of intense national coverage, not one mainstream news outlet told you where the Soulmate was anchored. Every major news report. The narrative was always framed around vast distance. Nobody mentioned the mere 2 city blocks of calm, protected water separating the vessel from the sand. Now you know. What makes this specific data set so incredibly vital in a case built on what happened? It simply does not require a second witness. Whatever happened to her happened to that watch at the same time. Its GPS was actively logging her position. Every interaction between Lynette and that watch is locked in its memory, and it will remain exactly what it is, regardless of what is later said or not said, admitted or flatly denied about what happened on April 4th, 2026. The photo places her right there, and several witnesses confirmed their presence. Time-stamped to the exact same afternoon captured in that photograph. One frozen forever in an image, the other still running long after it was taken.
One showing Brian walking toward the dock from the Abaco Inn alone, without Lynette by his side.
Whatever gap actually exists between those two photographs in terms of where they were and when,
Brian Hooker's publicly reported timeline places those critical events much later that evening. Their small 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy and set out.
During a rough ride in harsh weather, with winds he described at around 20 miles per hour.
She was wearing the dinghy safety lanyard, a cord designed to cut the motor power if the operator goes into the water, and then suddenly lost sight of her. Police confirmed he arrived there at approximately 4 in the morning. Every GPS coordinate. Investigators have the watch. To date, Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. The Royal Bahamas Police Force detained him for 5 days under a... His defense attorney later cited a terminally ill mother. For his publicly reported account to align with the electronic record, the watch data must tell a very specific story.
Moving toward the Soulmate, and then end just short of that vessel. The heart rate data would also need to reflect the physical distress of someone struggling in open water,
matching the exact impact he described.
No Starlink connection. No onboard electronics. Confirmed public reports add complex layers to what that data would have to show.
A flotation device to Lynette in the water, which Hopetown Search and Rescue later recovered.
I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue. They found the flotation device I threw to Mom when she fell overboard.
Focusing all of their rescue efforts in a much tighter area, and they are still out there searching today.
If that Apple Watch was on Lynette's wrist when she went overboard, it would have recorded that exact moment.
Showing the movement data shifting from the patterns of someone on a boat to something entirely different.
The biological signature of someone falling into cold Bahamian waters at night. If that specific signature does not exist in the watch data for the night of April 4th.
Yet the watch somehow still ended up back on the Soulmate anyway.
If Lynette was wearing that smartwatch before she vanished, how exactly did it get back to the yacht?
That Brian Hooker's professional background included work with AT&T, focusing on GPS and communication systems, raising questions about his deep knowledge of how those networks function and how they might be manipulated. To scramble the GPS on his work vehicle, making absolutely sure management never knew exactly where he was at any time. This report remains unverified by other news outlets and is presented strictly on that basis. When Lynette went overboard, multiple news reports confirmed this, pointing to the official Royal Bahamas Police Force statement. Whether the watch data truly supports this sequence is something federal agents in Fort Pierce can decide after analyzing both pieces of evidence. Explaining how a watch on a victim's wrist ended up back on a yacht she never reached again. This exact same logic applies to all forms of digital evidence. Banfield revealed a key detail about Lynette's daily routine, shared by those closest to her.
Lynette would take off her watch and set it on the charger.
Around what time would that be?
Most likely sometime after gather.
That predictable habit makes the watch's final charge a critical piece of forensic evidence. Is the final confirmed location the Apple Watch places Lynette before coming off her wrist? Just like Brian claims.
Yeah.
If those coordinates place the watch directly on the Soulmate, it completely contradicts his public story, placing that device on a specific yacht at a very precise hour on the night she vanished. At the dock. Or the inn, how did the watch actually get onto the boat where investigators ultimately found it? It went into the ocean with Lynette, with the logs ending from water damage or battery death. In that scenario, the accelerometer would capture that sudden impact. Every single charge creates a specific location and timestamp. None of those final moments are silent. The Coast Guard Investigative Service officially launched a criminal probe into Lynette's disappearance on April 8, 2026.
Brought in for formal questioning.
As two parallel investigations moved forward, the CGIS serves as the primary investigative branch of the Coast Guard,
with full power to cross international borders when Americans are lost at sea.
Forcing major tech giants, including Apple, to hand over private user data.
Every advanced tool in their forensic toolkit is being used in this case.
Anything you saw or heard
Has always been the complex issue of legal jurisdiction.
Lynette Hooker vanished somewhere in the Bahamas.
With its own courts and legal system, the local Bahamian police led the initial investigation.
Bahamian authorities released him without any charges. Normally, the local government holds complete authority, and whatever they decide is the final word on the matter.
Yet the U.S. Coast Guard launched their own criminal probe early on.
Once the CGIS steps in, they operate strictly under United States federal laws and authority.
Since the Soulmate is officially registered under United States maritime law, everything on board fell under U.S. jurisdiction and federal evidence laws,
Far exceeding what the local Bahamian probe could ever achieve alone.
yet the Bahamian inquiry produced absolutely no criminal charges.
The Coast Guard's Maritime Enforcement Division is designed specifically for this.
Designed to tackle cases just like this. Brian also hired a Michigan-based attorney for the domestic side of the case. Whatever this federal investigation uncovers, and whatever they decide to do with it, won't be limited. Federal grand jury tools are ready for Coast Guard investigators if the evidence demands it. Here is what we know. The boat is at Fort Pierce. Agents in protective gear. This is the physical proof of an active federal investigation moving forward. And the people running this case are definitely not passive observers. About that night on April 4th will ever be answered in federal court.
It is the first Mother's Day without my mom.
Knowing she is not just a text away anymore, and last Sunday was my birthday.
CBS News drone footage from May 11, 2026 confirmed it was docked right there,
Showing investigators in black shirts and blue gloves pulling items out in sealed evidence bags.
using sea and air assets along with a cutter tow.
And a specialized evidence team. They do this when they believe a vessel holds key proof to close a case.
Every Starlink system reported on board, along with any Bluetooth-enabled device.
And the Soulmate's own navigation electronics.
If the vessel was anchored in Aunt Pat Bay during the timeline Brian claimed,
And did that watch make it back on board? Brian Hooker denies any wrongdoing.
his lawyers have actively disputed the allegations made by her family. We are sharing these because they are part of the public record driving this criminal probe. During a 2-hour interview on the very day this federal criminal investigation officially opened.
Things got bad. I just cannot be out there with him anymore.
Well, before the dinghy, the safety kill switch, and that 4 a.m. arrival at Marsh Harbor.
Darlene Hamlet, Lynette's mother, told ABC News quite simply, "I only want the truth to come out. Hopefully that will clear up everything. She is just a mother waiting for answers about what happened to her daughter." 44 days in, with crime scene tape wrapping a boat in Florida and a federal probe that still has no answers. Sometime between May 8th and May 10th, 2026, the Soulmate set sail. But about 40 nautical miles off Melbourne, Florida, the Coast Guard Investigative Service intercepted the vessel. All part of a highly coordinated surveillance and interdiction operation. The interception was deliberate. This was absolutely not a routine boarding. Then, on May 12th, Fox News Digital obtained exclusive details, and an inside source confirmed that on May 13th, Treasure Coast News reported that agents were seen scouring the vessel and carrying off items in sealed evidence bags. A federal search warrant on the Soulmate. That warrant led to specific items. Those assets have been held in federal custody since the early days of this case.
Every single interior compartment is currently being processed by federal agents.
The automatic identification system, which continuously broadcasts and logs the vessel's coordinates over time.
That digital footprint is safely stored in the global maritime tracking infrastructure.
It pinpoints exactly where the Soulmate was anchored that night, revealing if the vessel moved at all during the hours surrounding Lynette's disappearance.
The full GPS history showing the vessel's path in the weeks leading up to April 4th. Every course correction. Every recorded coordinate.
It holds whatever biological trace evidence might still linger on the ship's surfaces.
Where they stayed for 24 hours after reporting her missing. They're looking for specific things, evidence of injury or struggle on the vessel, rather than in the ocean.
Either way, the presence or absence of that evidence speaks volumes. That Starlink satellite internet connection documented on the Hooker's social media feeds. The VHF radio logs. What was Brian communicating and with whom in those hours around April 4th?
The digital video recorder Bahamian police seized during a previous search, whatever was recorded is still out there in the files.
In the critical hours of April 4th, that footage is vital evidence.
Ashley Banfield's Drop Dead Serious podcast dug into claims about Brian Hooker's shady background
including allegations of his history with GPS tampering.
The name Soulmate takes on a deep significance when the person living on that vessel reportedly.
This is clearly no longer a missing person investigation.
Gloves removing sealed evidence bags from a 46-foot sailboat, 40 nautical miles off the Florida coast.
The Coast Guard labeled it that from day one, and now they have the boat. Brian Hooker remains uncharged.
Exactly what those evidence bags contain has not been made public.
Let us bring it back to that initial number, 600 feet.
An active scuba diver, a strong swimmer in her daughter's own words.
The basin she was in was 6 to 25 feet deep, with a bright white sand bottom clear from the air. Under normal conditions, a body in those waters rises within 1 to 3 days, easily spotted from above.
Analyst Sam Lyles built this assessment from charts
And tracking data. But he is not an investigator.
Those geographic questions provide a series of clues that the team in Fort Pierce is currently working through.
And the story Brian tells about what happened to Lynette Hooker on the night of April 4th, if that is indeed true,
then detectives are now dissecting the Soulmate at Fort Pierce to find out which way is the truth. A body pinned to the bottom of a clear, shallow basin by a deliberate weight will never surface.
Divers searched several spots, but whether they hit the right areas in the right sequence is still a major question. The third scenario leads straight to land, one of the nearby cays or the Abaco mainland, far beyond any water search. They even deployed cadaver dogs.
exactly where those dogs searched remains a secret. Meanwhile, federal investigators in Fort Pierce still hold the boat.
They have the GPS logs, digital files, DNA trace evidence, and complete chat history. They also have Carly Aylesworth's critical testimony, delivered in a tense 2-hour interview the day CGIS launched this criminal case.
They hold statements from the family. They even have the life jacket found right where the dinghy washed ashore.
They have the final text message Lynette sent before boarding, yet Brian Hooker has still not been charged.
The next steps hinge on the case investigators have built, what the Soulmate reveals to forensic teams, and what secrets those sealed evidence bags hold.
Detectives are working forward from the geography, focusing on the one detail everyone missed, a number that completely reframes every single question in this mystery.
Lynette Hooker remains missing, over 40 days and counting. Her grieving mother just wants the truth.
Her daughter, Carly, spent Mother's Day entirely alone for the first time. She is now carrying a heavy burden of threats made long before her mother vanished. There is a beach on Elbow Cay, just 600 feet from where the Soulmate anchored. Brian claimed he last saw her swimming to shore. Later, he claimed she swam back to the boat. Two conflicting directions, two different stories, one missing woman who was only 600 feet from safety. She should have survived. Investigators are trying to find out why she did not.
If you care about this case, and if you have followed the details this far, you do. Stick with us.
We will track every new development as it breaks, including whatever comes out of the forensic sweep at Fort Pierce.
Any pending charges from the federal grand jury,
any word from the mystery witness vessel, and every piece of public record as it surfaces. Subscribe now so you never miss an update on this case or our other investigations.
If this breakdown brings the case into focus for you, share it with others who need to see what the actual geography of this mystery looks like. That crucial 600 feet measurement deserves to be at the center of the public discussion about Lynette Hooker.
If you have any information about the vessel the Coast Guard is searching for, the sailboat anchored near the Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4, 2026, please contact CGIS Miami immediately.
Lynette's family is still waiting for answers. The investigation remains open, and she is still out there somewhere, waiting to be found.
The events in this video are based on public reports, official agency statements, court records, and independent analysis.
Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime as of this release and must be presumed innocent.
Through his attorney, he has denied any and all wrongdoing.
The geographic breakdown shown here was published by Sam Lyles on the Svioti blog on April 18, 2026. It represents an independent assessment by a sailing writer and analyst, not an official conclusion from law enforcement.
The troubling claims made by the family represent their own personal accounts and have yet to be proven in court.
The United States Coast Guard Investigative Service continues its active criminal probe into the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. Crucial details of this case may have developed further between our production and the moment you watch this.